I wasn't aware Norway had gone to the elections, had gone to vote. That looks like a. And whilst the left, yep, they're Labour. I was like, pretty sure that's a left party. That, I think, is a bit of a surprise. Obviously, the Scandinavian countries are kind of regarded as some sort of sock-dem utopia. Well, the reality might be a lot different, but in terms of policies and implementations. And again, the funny thing is, even though you had the protests in the US of no kings targeting Trump, well, and people tended to point to the Scandinavian approach as being great. It kind of ignores the fact that Norway and Sweden and Denmark all have royalty. But we don't expect people to think or think beyond their immediate protest. But I was not unaware of the degree to which a right wing swing or a conservative swing was taking place in Scandinavia. There's been, again, it depends of how you look and where you look, apparently increasing dissatisfaction with the levels of migration, the inability or the unwillingness of those migrants to partake in the Scandinavian society and basically set themselves apart and pursue special treatment. So there is a dissatisfaction growing in things like that. Now, is it enough to bubble up and reach the media or public awareness? Well, you haven't heard of it, so probably not. But to see this right wing party or a conservative move push through like it did, okay, that's like seeing Reform get 30% of the vote in the UK. It should send a message to those that have taken or retained power that they might only have one election cycle left before the axe comes for them if they don't change their approach. Now, that's not meaning by saying the axe coming for them isn't saying that there's a violent outcome. It's just saying that they're not going to get re-elected. I don't think that phrase is very common anymore. Or if it is, probably shouldn't be used much, given the political violence that's been going on of late. It's like we talked about the other day about the Nepalese violence being largely driven because of banning things on the internet. Apparently, I saw some claims, I don't know how backed up they are, that the protesters were throwing the politicians into the river. Well, it's better than throwing them off a roof. Um, and I'm not 100% sure which way the government there was leaning, and whether or not that was, I mean, it's been very, very unstable, but I'd have to go and look up whether or not Nepal has been suffering any sort of internal violence. I know Bhutan had Maoist rebels attempting a civil war. Very, very violent people. Um, but I'd have to go back and look it up. I'm sure there'd be some sort of presence, but yeah, I don't know enough about it, to be honest. The other thing out of this particular article that sort of stands out is the statement, which has become a slur driven by progressives, that populism is bad, that the emergence of a populist conservative movement is horrible and should be suppressed and dismantled. From people who argue that politics should be a representation of the population's political will and a representation of what the masses desire, i.e., that the majority chooses, tyranny of the majority. The idea that populism is bad, well, for a start, it just means that the people don't like your position as much as they like someone else's position. But you heard the rhetoric, particularly after Trump or during Trump's uh, first presidency, was this rise of the statement that populism is bad, right wing, in particular right wing populism, but populism is bad. It's wrong. It's fascism or whatever. Well, that means you don't understand fascism, but it's coming from an argument, generally from people who are socialists or socialist aligned, of well, we're supposed to represent the voice of the people. We're supposed to represent the people. Well, it looks like the people have gone over there and decided that this is more like what they want. And it seems to come out largely as a whinge from progressives, regressives, who are facing their own consequences, or who potentially are facing consequences for their own actions. And so it's another tool for them to dismiss the will of the people. It's populism, therefore it's bad. But if more people vote for me, it's good. It's not populism, then it's the will of the people. Uh, it's rearranging the language and rearranging it badly. So, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see again what happens in the coming years. Uh, Obviously, there's the AFD in Germany making gains constantly and upsetting the CDU and the Greens. I still think there's fallout happening in Romania from their recent elections. Obviously, there's uh, now I used to call them National Front. They're not National Front. They're something else. The party in France that Marine Le Pen heads up, the Reform Party in the UK, probably because people see the Tories, the traditional Conservatives, as not conservative anymore. So there's going to be a push. Now, funnily enough, it says that there was an initial domination of the campaign of foreign policy with wars in Gaza and Ukraine. There was a small article, a small headline that came out a couple of days ago with, okay, in the context of a bunch of nations saying, oh, we're going to recognize Palestinian statehood at the UN, of some rather progressive governments, nations, who've said, nope, we're not going to do that. We're not going to recognize Palestinian statehood. And that left me scratching my head a little because I'd always assumed that they would have just blanketly accepted that statement given the type of nation they were. And I wondered whether they'd had maybe a negative experience from Palestinian refugees or migrants that they'd accepted into their community, perhaps. Or maybe there was some other underlying reason was never really discussed. Um, but it also did sort of kick into the back of the mind or into the forefront about the role some of the other neighbours in the Middle East have or don't have in supporting refugees out of the Palestinian territories, in particular Egypt and Jordan. Well, Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon. And I think, well, each of those nations have had very negative effects from uh, having Palestinian populations within their borders. Now, it's not to say that there was the entirety of the population that they had in their borders, but there were certainly some very active portions of the population, particularly in Jordan, where they attempted to kill the king. Um, and so you can kind of understand why they don't want them back within their borders. But it's like, well, hang on, if these nations don't want them, and for very specific reasons, does what makes everybody else think taking them in is going to make things any different for them? I mean, people have a right to exist, but at the same time, other nations should be under no obligation to forcibly take in. Ah, it's a mess. It's an absolute mess.